called this one. Now, throughout the church history, we were, we learned, or people were in agreement that there was a global flood, right? The flood was global. It was, most of the church fathers and people in the church history agreed that one. And there was no reason to doubt it. But beginning of the middle of the 18th century, a new classification began. And in the classification of species of animals, and what happened, they found out about 5,000 mammals. Mammals means, the animals or creatures that give birth to babies, not laying eggs. So 5,000 mammals species were found, all right? Now, then there was a question. That question was, how can Noah's Ark contain all this number of mammals in his ark? So the idea was that it was something maybe may not be true. Maybe it is a mythology or something like that. That's what some people were actually thinking. All right. So what we are going to look at today is, first of all, in our first session, why we believe that the flood was global, right? A universal flood. There are some liberal Christians who would say that flood was local, but we are going to argue from the Bible that, first of all, this flood was global, and we are going to see its significance in our discussion in this topic, its significance as a Christian, how we need to understand. So let's look at biblical reasons for global flood. Whitcomb and Morris have, in their book, they have listed these reasons. So these are brought here. Let's look at, first of all, depth of the flood. The number one reason why we believe that flood was global, it is simply because the depth of the flood. Depth of the flood. How deep, how much water was there? For example, according to Genesis chapter 7, verse 19 to 20, this is what we read. All the high mountains everywhere under the heavens were covered by 15 cubits of water. Listen that carefully. 15 cubits means about 20 to 23 feet of water. Where? Now, we are talking about mountains on this earth, and on all high mountains everywhere under heavens. The idea is that when the word is used in the Bible, under heaven, under the sky, look at all the mountains. And all the mountains, at least if there is a highest mountain, now we know that we have a highest mountain known as Everest. I don't think that the Everest was there at that time. Most probably, you have all these Everest and other things came into being during the flood, right? During the shake, the huge shake, the huge earthquake that happened, and movement of tectonic plates, as we see now. During the flood, there was a lot of shaking and movements of tectonic plates, and that's how, as we see here in this part of India or the northern part of India, you see Everest as the height. Now imagine that there is a mountain, high mountain, something like Everest, and Bible says even the high mountain has at least 20 feet above water was there. Now, what we have to understand, this suggests that the flood of Noah's day was global. As Whitcomb and Morris indicate, one need not to be a professional scientist. You don't have to be a scientist to realize the tremendous implication of these biblical statements. This one. What is the implication? If only one, we are not talking about all the mountain. We are not talking about all the mountain. If only one of the high mountains had been covered with the water, you know what will happen? If imagine one of the mountain, so the water level rose to the one of the mountains on this earth, you know what happened? That means the flood is global. Because, you know, even 1 meter of water from the sea rises, if the sea level rise altogether, you know how many parts of our globe will be no more? And imagine, so if there, you know, now the scientists say, you know, if water level rises from the sea, you know, if 1 meter rises, that means huge area of the earth is going to be covered with the water. Now imagine a high mountain, how many feet high it would be. Like, you know, imagine that means sea level rises about 1,000 meters, a kilometer. What is going to happen if sea level rises a kilometer? And then you can imagine the amount, how the entire earth is going to be flooded. So when Bible says all the high mountains everywhere under the heavens were covered at least by 15 cubits of water or 20 feet, it is so huge, which clearly suggests that this is a global flood, not a local one. But number B, duration of the flood. Chapter 7 and chapter 8 of Genesis. If we compare these two chapters, this is what we read. Flood waters prevailed on the earth. How many days? 371 days. 371 days water prevailed on the earth. Can you imagine? So could the waters from a local flood prevail on earth for 371 days? So, you know, you see recently, I think New Zealand or somewhere, they had again flood. But you will see within you know, Pakistan had a flood. You know, it took maybe a month to, you know, some of the water to reside from the low area. Yes. But at least within a month, if we have, you know, it can just go back to the previous stage. But imagine 370 days water prevailed on the earth. That means since it was more than 7 months before the tops of any mountain were visible, it says it took 7 months, 7 into, that means 2, okay, just for a rough calculation, it took 210 days to see the top of a mountain. It took 210 days to see just the very top of a mountain. So that 20 feet water, in order for that water to go down, subside, it took 7 months. How could Noah and his family drift about in a local flood for 7 months? Can you imagine? They were drifting on the water on that ship for 7 months. Question is how this is possible. Only a global flood can explain the duration of the flood waters. So when we look at the duration of the flood, that says this is a global flood. Another one, geology of the flood. Geology of the flood. All right, this is what Bible says in Genesis 7, verse 11. In the 6th year, in the 2nd month, on the 7th day of Noah's life, all the fountains of great deep burst open. You see what happened? all the fountains of the great deep burst open, and the floodgates of sky were open. So water came from two sources. All right, number one, great deep. Number two, from sky. Now that means they were, they were already, water was coming. There was, heat was there, sun was there, sun was heating the sea surface, and clouds were gathered. It was there. But simply because what you see on the surface, with the cloud that you see on our sky, you cannot have a global flood. So that is what happened. Now, great deep. Water came from great deep. Now, people did not believe that one. It is hard for people to believe from where the water comes. From where water comes. That's what people ask. But now, recently, people come with a study saying that, there is more water than what you see in our seas under the crust of the earth. Right? Under the crust of our earth, there is much more water than what you see in our seas, like Indian Ocean, Pacific Ocean. Right? All other oceans, you combine, you have water more than that. Even water is deposited under the earth. So that means God miraculously brought. So that is the reason I say there was a huge movement in the tectonic plates that caused, not only water was coming, and it caused a huge tsunami. Okay, tsunami. And waves came and water covered all this earth. So the geology of the flood suggests that it is not only, it's not simply a local, but it's a global flood. Fourth reason why we believe that it was a global flood, it is because of the size of the ark. All right, size of the ark. It's given in chapter 6. This is what we read. This is how you shall make it. The length of ark 300 cubits, its breadth 50 cubits, its height 30 cubits. Imagine that one. Now, you might be wondering, when maybe you may not have thought really the size of the ark, and we can call it it was actually a ship. It was a huge ship, based upon cubit as inches. Now, what is the size? The ark was 437 feet long. Imagine 500 feet. It's just a little less than 500 feet long. And it was 72, that means about 73 feet wide. And it was about 44 feet high. And this would have a deck area of 95,700 square feet. And it will have a volume of more than 1 lakh. Okay, now 13,96,000 cubic feet, which is so huge, right? And a gross tonnage of this many tons it can carry. Right now, let me. This is the equivalent of a modern day railroad box cars, or equivalent of if you see our goods carrier of a train. You see train goods carrier, which is so long it can carry that many. For example, I have a picture here. How the size of size of the ark, how big it is going to be. All right, it is not small. I'm saying it is so huge. It was so big. All right, don't think it was a small boat that Noah built. People would call it as a maybe a boat, but actually it was not a small boat, but it was a huge ship that Noah built. So if you happen to go to, okay, 1 second. Let me see if I can show you something here. Okay. I wanted to show you something, and that is if you want to, if you ever go and see, if you want to really see, if you can, you might have heard about Creation Museum in the US. All right, Ken Ham is a founder, and if you happen to visit there, you will see that they have made a model of Noah's Ark. All right, and I wanted to show you how big this is. Actually, looking at the exact measurement, they have built the ark, something that maybe you can look at the internet and see. This is Noah Ark by Creation Museum. So when you get time, please go ahead and look at it. Right. So I'm saying people might think that this is so small. Right. Noah built a very small ark, but if you really look at the measurement that is given in the Bible, then this ark is really, really big. That is what I wanted to say here. It is really, really big. Okay. So now let me come here. So why we believe that the flood was global? It is simply that the size of the ark is so huge. In order to have a small flood, God doesn't have to ask Noah to build this big ark, because here God says, I'm going to destroy the entire earth with a flood, and I wanted to preserve the life in the new earth, or the preserved earth. I wanted to preserve, have animals and everything. So you need to have a big ark. Okay. So reason number one, why we believe the flood was global. Number one, depth of the flood. Number two, duration of the flood. Number three, geology of the flood. Number three, size of the ark. Okay, that's size of the ark, number four, actually. Next one. Why we believe it is global. It's simply because of the need of an ark. Why there was ark necessary? The need is reflected by comparing the following passages in Genesis chapter 6, 7, and and look at all those verses. If the flood were local, why did Noah have to build an ark? He could have just walked to the other side of the mountains and escaped. If he was traveling maybe 10 miles a day, or imagine 10 miles a day, or 12 miles a day. Noah and his family have traveled over 20,000 miles in 6 months. He can travel a lot of distance. God could have simply warned Noah, hey Noah, I'm going to destroy this area of the earth. You flee from here. Like God asked Lord, you remember Lord in Sodom? God asked Lord, hey, please go from here. Go from Sodom. I'm going to destroy Sodom because of their sin. You flee. But God did not tell Noah to flee. If it is local, God could have told Noah to flee. Why? He did not tell. That tells us that it was global. Now, the next reason why we believe it was global, the testimony of Apostle Peter. 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 3 to 7. This is what Peter says. Notice, first of all, that in the last days, mockers will come with their mocking, following after their own lust, and saying, where is the promise of his coming? Mockers will come and say they are lusting. They're lusting for sin and the pleasures of this world. And then they are going to say, your Bible said, where, there will be, Jesus will be coming back. Where is the promise of his coming? For ever since fathers fell asleep, all continues just as it was from the beginning of creation. No change at all. Now, for when they maintain this, it escapes their notice that by the word of God, the heavens existed long ago, and the earth was formed out of water by water, through which the world at that time was destroyed. Remember, Peter says the world was destroyed by water. How? Being flooded with water. So the earth that God created was judged by flood. That's what Peter says. The present heavens and the earth by his word are being reserved now for what? For fire, kept for the day of judgment and destruction of ungodly men. Ungodly men. So what are we to learn? People would ask this question, hey, where is the promise of Jesus coming? Peter answers here, wait. Even Peter says there is a time coming in the future. Until that time, it has to continue as it this way. People will mock and people will say everything. But at the end, they will say, but they are going to experience the judgment, the fire. So Peter says, the flood was global, not local. Next one, the next reason why we believe that this was global, the purpose of flood. God's purpose for the flood is clearly stated in Genesis 6, verse 5 to 7. Then the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great on the earth, and that every indent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. Yes, says the wickedness of man was great on the earth, right? The wickedness increased, and it became so great that intent of the thoughts of man's heart was only evil, and it was continuous. Everyone was thinking evil in their mind. And the Lord was sorry that he had made man on the earth. And Bible says he was grieved in his heart. The Lord said, I will blot out man, whom I have created from the face of the land, from man to animals to creeping things and to birds of the sky. For I am sorry that I have made them. So why God sent flood? To blot out, right? To blot out man from the face of the earth. So it cannot be local. God elaborates that in verse 11 to 13. Now, earth was corrupt in the sight of God. Earth was filled with violence. God looked on the earth. Behold, it was corrupt. And for all the flesh had corrupted their way upon the earth. That God said to Noah, end of all flesh has come before me. And the earth is filled with violence because of them. And behold, I'm about to destroy them with the earth. Thus, so what we understand, the purpose of flood was to judge the sinfulness of man, and therefore it has to be global. So that means I have given here how many? 6, 7 reasons why we believe the flood was global. Why we believe the flood was global. Now, let's look at God's involvement in flood. In our design, how God involved. God revealed to Noah how many years prior? 120 years prior to flood that he was going to flood the universe. So the message came to Noah 120 years before the flood ever took place. Right? For over a century, Noah and his family built the ark. Remember, so this is a huge ark. Remember the size of the ark. Very huge. It cannot be built very soon, and no one was helping them in a sense. I mean, basically, this is built by this family. And not only Noah had to build the ark, Noah also was preaching to the world of coming judgment. Noah was talking to people. Do you know why? The gospel of Noah is the ark. Right? Ark is a symbol of coming judgment. Now, Noah is talking to people. You know why I built the ark? God is going to judge the world with a divinely given design for the ark. It is rectangular shape, provided a vessel that was designed to float and not to move through the water. It was simply designed to float on the water. It's not to simply move like a ship with the propeller moves to one place, to one direction. It's simply to float. Wherever the wind it takes, it will be there. Just float. Its spatial dimension provided ample room for its crew and creatures. In light of Genesis 7:22, ark was designed to accommodate all the pairs of land animals. Now, the question is this one, right? How could all these animals have fit into the ark? Now, we are talking about elephant. We are talking about bigger animals than elephant. Now, we are talking about dinosaurs, right? How big a dinosaur is going to be? I have a picture. Let me see if I can bring that up here. Yes, here is one. Okay, a picture of one, and here is another one. All right. Okay. And so the question has to be asked: how could these huge animals can fit in? So maybe are we wrong? So that this was some of the critics' argument. We are going to see. So based upon the size of the ark, it could have handled more than, look at this one, 50,000 animals and there was room left over. So according to the size of the ark could have was able to hold more than 50,000 animals. Now, how that is possible? Think about, I think there was a time, we went to Mysore in southern India, because Mysore has got a huge zoological park where you have different kinds of elephants, different kinds of giraffes. And it's like you need to walk 4 kilometers to see this park, this zoological park where they locate these animals. So now you can see they are in various places. So the question is, we are talking about 50,000 animals. How can they all be put in this one? That would be a question. But according to the size, the measurement, yes, this ark is so huge. It is so huge, it can hold many, because we already said this can carry almost 14,000 ton can carry. Right, the height was 43 feet and the width was 72 feet or 73. And the length was 437 feet. So it is really big, as I said before. Now, God's care for those in the ark. How did God care? In light of Genesis 8 verse 1, God provided for the ark's passengers with the necessary provisions for survival. Right? God provided for the passengers. This may have at times included a hibernation process for some of the animals. Biblical text clearly indicates that God miraculously intervened in the process of flooding. It appears that certain aspects of the provision for Noah's family and animals involved human participation. As such, Noah and his family had a very active role in maintaining the animals on the ark. The number of animals with only 8 people to take care of them has been an excuse used by many compromisers to undermine biblical materials. They would raise the question, how can 8 people care for thousands of animals? We presently can account for how many? 5,000 species of mammals. That is all what we can care for. And we can now find, right? At present. Not only did Noah have to contend with the mammals, but he also had to contend with the birds, amphibians, and reptiles, including dinosaurs, which we don't have now. When we count known types of animals fitting into these species, now we presently know of less than 20,000 species. 20,000 species. Question is this: how can 8 people, remember Noah and his family, have taken care of all these animals? That is a question. In responding to this, we need to keep in mind that these present figures do not take into account a biblical kind. Here is the point. When Bible say a kind, there is certain things that we need to keep in our mind. Remember, there is a difference between biblical kind and a variation within the kind. Based upon biblical evidence, right, especially study of clean and unclean animals listed in Leviticus and Deuteronomy, Arthur Jones demonstrated there were between 24 166 kinds of clean animals. All right, how many? There were between 24 to 66 kinds of clean animals, and there was 604, between 604 and 734, between that kind of unclean animals taken on the ark. So how many kinds? Let's take the biggest number, 66 plus 66 clean animals, 734 unclean animals, which will be about 800 kinds of animals, 800 kinds. Because the way the Bible explains kind is something we need to understand. So if there are only 800 kinds maximum, this would give an estimate of between maybe 1,500 to maybe 2,300 animals taken to the ark or on the ark. Okay, when I say kind, for example, right now when we talk about dogs, right, you can talk about various, like a German Shepherd, various types of, people say there are various types of or species of dogs now. That's what people sometimes would say. But according to the Bible, there would be only one kind of dogs that God created, and later because of the because of joining, because of the gene pool where it can produce different kinds. Now we have different types of dog, right? Dogs that are very small, dogs that are bigger, like human beings. You can come up with all kinds of dogs. But when God took animals, just for imagine, God took dogs. God had to take only 2 dogs to repopulate the earth. Not all kinds or types of dog. He doesn't have to. So that will reduce the number quite a bit. So that means there is an estimate between 1,500 to 2,300 animals taken on the ark. And Scherer has drawn similar conclusion from a scientific evidence. In a recent definitive work, John Woodmarape has expressed his endorsement of these estimates for number of animals taken on the ark. In order to refute the challenges of compromising Christians who attack global flood, Woodmarape's work is a 300-page feasibility study to provide systematic analysis of providing for various needs of 16,000 animals housed in Noah's ark during the course of a year. He uses a large number than demanded by the immediate biblical evidence in order to demonstrate that the manner in which God intended to take care of the animal was within the realm of the human capabilities of 8 people, right? Even without God's daily intervening on their behalf. So what are we talking here? The question is, can 8 people care for these thousands of animals? Now understand, if God has given wisdom to Noah to build an ark that is so huge in this size, God also has given Noah wisdom how, without much work, how he can take care of the animals, right? All these animals. And these animals, we are going to see later, are not so big as we sometimes assume. We might think that, okay, how can a dinosaurs who eat vegetable or plants Noah feed, right? These huge dinosaurs, how can we feed? Now we are going to see the actual story is a little different. Noah did not feed a dinosaur which is bigger like a 3-story building. Noah did not feed it. Why? We'll see the reason why Noah did not feed a huge animals, right? We'll we will look the answer later. But now let's look at another issue. So the first, God's intervention. Number one, design of the ark, where God involved, right? God revealed to Noah 120 years ago about the flood. And he asked Noah to build the ark. Number two, God's care for those in the ark. It was basically God was caring for all the animals, right? But God appointed Noah and his family as the basic carer. They were the people who basically took care of everything, but without much work, in a sense, that God gave Noah wisdom to care for this animal without much labor. They don't have to be fed like we feed now, like domesticated animals. Okay, we'll see that also sometime later how they do. But now let's look at how God intervened in this flood. Third way, how God intervened. Third, God's uplifting of the ocean floor. Ocean floor. With the uplifting of the ocean basins in Genesis 7 to 11, right? Chapter 7, verse 11. This is what we read. All the springs of the great deep burst forth. Springs of the great deep burst forth. This expelled enough water into the atmosphere that it would rain for 40 days and 40 nights. We know that, right? 40 days and 40 nights of rain. The uplifting of the ocean basins, accompanied by enormous explosions of sub-oceanic and subterranean magmas and streams, together with the corresponding sinking of continents. Look at that one. Corresponding sinking of continents continued for 6 weeks until the flood attained its maximum mountain covering depth. So what does that tell us, right? It tells us that the way that you see with the 7 continents now may not be the same when God created in the beginning. But God shook everything, uplifted the ocean floor, lifted up, and there was a huge water had come to rain. And we read that this depth was maintained for another 110 days until waters had destroyed every living thing on the continent. Every living things were destroyed. So the uniqueness of this geological discontinuity in the earth history is emphasized in chapter 8, verse 21 to 22. Furthermore, the terms of rainbow covenant, remember that one. Rainbow covenant in Genesis 9 and its repetition in Isaiah 54 confirm supernatural uniqueness of global catastrophe. Global catastrophe. So what are we to understand? What are we understand? Yes, God intervened. It was not a natural phenomena. Flood was not a natural phenomena. It was a God's direct intervention into the earth that He has created, so that there will be flood that will cover the whole world. That is, so water came from deep, right? Deep. Fourth, God's releasing of waters above the expanse. Now, what do we read? In Genesis chapter 7, verse 11 states that floodgates of the heavens were opened. This means that all the water had been above the earth expanse fell upon the earth. So all what you see, that was there fell to the earth. So in the pre-flood world, there was apparently a thicker water-saturated cloud over the earth. So one thing is sure, the earth atmosphere was not like what you see now. Now, if you look at it, mostly you see blue skies, mostly, right? And shallow clouds. But before the flood, there was much thicker water saturated cloud were on the top, on the atmosphere of the earth. And that created some kind of worldwide subtropical condition. So, with the floodgates of heavens being opened, this indicates that the dense waters in the sky was flooded upon the earth. So water that was thicker, clouds, everything came down. Today, many young earth creationists understand that the force of the expelled water from the springs of the great deep, as worldwide earthquake and volcanic activity simultaneously occurred, was expelled and filled the earth's heavy cloud over inner water so that it could produce enough rain for a great catastrophic storm that would last for 40 days and 40 nights. With the convergence of the water from below and waters from above the earth, this type of flood have completely changed topographical features from what it had been before flood. So, what are we saying? God's intervention in raining. How can there be rain for 40 days and 40 nights? That is the question. How can there be? Right? Now, the answer is God intervened directly. So that God changed many things that you see on this earth now. Changed many things. It was not exactly the way the earth looked before the flood. Right? Before the flood, things were much different. Remember, for example, now we have a season of snow in the South Pole and North Pole. You know that one? Maybe some of you, where you live now, might snow. But there was time, there was no snow at all because there was no ice age before the flood. Ice age began after the flood. You know, the weather that you see now is completely different from what you see in the weather before the flood. Let me bring one more point here. God's intervention in formation of ocean basins and mountain ranges. Now, what did God do with all the mountains and ocean basins? God's supernatural intervention was also needed as floodwaters began to recede. Two texts are helpful in understanding what happened at this point. Genesis chapter 8, verse 2 and 3 informs us that when waters began to recede, that the springs of the deep and floodgates of the heavens had been closed and rain stopped. Two things: water from the deep and water from the above stopped. And verse 2 and 3 have been misinterpreted as implying that God eliminated the water vapor canopy. However, this is not what the text actually says. These verses indicate that two sources of water were stopped and restrained, and not that they were done away with. Rain for 40 days and 40 nights does not mean that this was all there was to the flood. All right? Simply, don't think the earth was filled with water simply because of rain. No, it's not simply because of rain. Yes, there was rain for 40 days. That is right. But biblical text clearly indicates that 40 days and nights of rain were an incipient part of the flood. However, waters would increase on the earth for 150 days. Even after the rain, 40 days it rained, but waters continuously rose for 150 days. How come? We often forget that there were other mechanisms that produced the flood. How? What produced the flood? Such as volcanoes and earthquakes, which would have included other means of water displacement, such as tsunamis. Springs of the deep, that is what we read from the Bible, would have included ocean floors being lifted up at the beginning of the flood. And Genesis chapter 8, verse 2 to 3 indicates that would have been reversed when they sank down. So when the water began to come down, only when God rearranged the floor, sea floor and other tectonic plates. This would have resulted in new and much deeper ocean basin being formed to serve as the vast reservoirs for the two oceans, which were separated from each other by atmospheric expanse before the flood. So what God might have done, this is the assumption, as God rearranged, the ocean floors, it became certain area became so deep, maybe some of the Pacific areas and other places, and Indian Oceans. Indian Ocean is known to be the deepest ocean. So some of the ocean basins became so deep that it became the kind of big reservoir of water. It can hold now a lot of water. That means some areas have come up so big, like mountains became so big in some areas. As a natural result of the subsidence was that waters returned from off earth continually, permitting continents to emerge from the oceans again, as they had done on the third day of creation. So what are we saying, friends, here? God rearranged the continents. That maybe, yes, sometime now scientists would say, yes, it looks like, if you really look at all the continents, it looks like it has come all from the big, it was something, what it was together. That is what they were saying, but they cannot explain how. But Bible says, yes, it was something separated during the flood. Continents were not like this. You have 7 continents, but probably before it was not like this. So what God did, God rearranged ocean basins and created so deep that the water that was on all over the earth now goes to some specific areas where it is so deep. And that means some area became so deep and other areas became so high, like what you have at Mount Everest, right? At Mount Everest. That all this came simply because of the flood. It became so high because of the flood. Now, Psalm 104, verse 6 to 9, there is also reference to Noahic flood. A key verse there is verse 8, and it is translated different ways, but looking past these, I will translate this verse according to the general guidelines of a normal Greek Hebrew grammar. This is what we read. The mountains rose. Look at that one, Psalm 104, verse 6 to, and especially 8. The mountain rose, valleys sank down to the place which you established for them. See, mountains rose. Valleys sank down because of the flood. This pictures valleys singing as we saw with Genesis 8. Therefore, God naturally depressed certain parts of the earth's crust to the place he had established for them. Even though you see earth is so round, if you remove the water, of course it's a globe, that's for sure, but you see great deep, so huge deep, if you remove the water from the crust of the earth, on the top of the earth. It will look something completely different. It will never be beautiful. It will never look pretty, actually. But God, actually, God made to sink certain areas and brought other areas on. We also read in Psalm 8 that mountain rose. Look at that one. Mountains rose. God supernaturally lifted up great mountain ranges, much higher than they had been before the flood. I would say Everest is a classic example of what happened during flood. In order to offset the lower depths in the some of the ocean basins. The reason why we have the highest mountain in our side, and the reason why we have the deepest ocean on our earth, in the Indian Ocean, is simply the way that God arranged. And such an interpretation of Psalm 104, verse 8, incidentally, solves one of the great problems connected with the global flood concern. It frequently maintained, and rightfully so, that there are simply not enough water in our present ocean to cover all the mountains of the earth. People come up with this argument. Do we have enough water to cover the entire earth? All right, that is a question that you usually ask. Even if ocean basins could somehow be pushed up to the present sea levels, for there are many mountains more than 20,000 feet high, with an average of only 12,000 feet of water to cover them. But if these mountains, with their forces, rose to their present height since the flood, we may assume that none of the high mountains that existed before the flood were more than 6,000 or 7,000 feet high. All right, what is that says? All the mountains that were before the flood, maximum height would have been 6,000, right? What is the height of the Everest now? About 20,000 feet high, right? 20,000. It became so high only after the flood, but none of the mountains were so high before. It is because God rearranged. All right. So when you get the notes, you have the notes, please take time and read through the flood.